when you texted me and were like, are you logging in? I was in the middle of Christmas shopping.
Oh, no.
And,
I'm
I
so
mean, I'm not out and about online. I was, like, at my computer, but I was, like, researching stuff, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, I'm on my way," and then it was like, "Oh, crap, I gotta get my drinks, I gotta get my
now,
snacks, I gotta get
is
ready
this
for this journey."
is Christmas shopping a euphemism in this scenario, Jay William?
No, it is not. Christmas shopping is
Usually,
literally what I was doing.
I was
Yeah, that
I
was
you know,
that
that's usually I'm like, "Oh, it's Christmas in July."
Welcome to Backtracking, the show where two old friends take a second listen to influential bands' catalogs, track by track. I am J. William Holm.
And I'm Dan Fiden. We'll be taking this journey together, providing context, both personal and historical, on some legendary bands. For our second season, we picked none other than pioneering indie rockers, American Music Club.
Today on Backtracking, come on, beautiful, we'll go sit on the front lawn and backtrack American Music Club's third LP, 1988's California. Lauded by some as the band's masterpiece, the album marks the first time Eitzel is the band's sole credited lyricist and songwriter. But it also comes at a time when their relationship with producer Tom Mallon is both closer and more complicated. But enough lollygagging. Are you waiting for Sister Midnight to anesthetize, Dan?
I sure am, JW, but while I wait, let's talk turkey. After Engine was released, the band set out on tour, playing generally well-received dates across the U.S. But we're not talking about Yankee Stadium. The band was playing in record stores and small clubs in big cities and college towns. And despite, or perhaps because of the efforts of Frontier's Lisa Fancher, sales were slow and radio, even college radio, was not picking it up. AMC was getting a good reception with critics, however, especially in the UK, where Melody Maker raved that, quote, Engine's songs were truly stunning in range and power. But reviews don't pay the bills, and the band eventually returned to San Francisco and back to their day jobs. The band was not pleased.
Especially Eitzel, who'd had enough of selling vacations by phone. He quit his job at Creative Leisure and jumped into the exciting world of data entry at St. Francis Hospital. He also moved into Tom Mallon's studio in the Tenderloin, which helped kick off the writing and recording for Engine's follow-up. Proximity to Mallon led to a closer relationship between the two, and the resulting conversations around the sound of the third album resulted in a more cohesive, shared vision between the producer and his protege. Unfortunately, like Ike and Tina before them, the honeymoon did not last. Once tape started rolling, Mallon's monomaniacal means made a return. It was not unusual for Eitzel and the band to record, then return later to playback, only to hear their performances redone or heavily re-edited by Mallon. As if that wasn't enough, the decision was made for Mallon's girlfriend Leslie Rule to become the band's manager, despite the fact that she got along with neither Mark Eitzel nor Frontier label boss Lisa Fancher. The band did recruit longtime Voodoo collaborator, pedal steel player, and future producer Bruce Caffin, so it wasn't all bad news by the time California was finished and released in November of 1988.
So what else was bad news in late 1988? Fans of short Greek Democrats got some bad news when Michael Dukakis was defeated by George H.W. Bush in the U.S. presidential election. Pan Am Flight 103 was blown up over Scotland in a Libyan state-sponsored terrorist attack, and an earthquake in Soviet Armenia kills more than 25,000 people. The first computer worm is distributed on the internet, and the LA Dodgers beat the Oakland A's in the World Series, which was bad news for Voodoo and the rest of the Bay Area's baseball fans. So, Jay William, we have set the table, and we are diving in this week and next week into what many people consider American Music Club's masterpiece, their masterwork, California.
Sorry, just missed tabs there. And indeed, many people do consider this to be their personal favorite AMC album. This seems to be one of the ones most often, I think, held up as like, this is the best AMC album.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, I think this concept is going to come up again and again throughout the discussion over the course of the next two episodes. I think it is a very interesting album. I think it is undeniably a great album, or a very, very good album. I am not certain that it is my personal American Music Club pick for Masterpiece.
I agree with you. It's not my personal favorite AMC album, but I will say it is the first AMC album I ever heard because this is the album that I was attracted to the cover of it
Yeah.
in the used record bin at my hometown record store. So I've got it right here. It's still got the sticker on it. Backstreet Records, $2.99. And
Unbelievable. A bargain at $2.99 today and back in what year would that have been? 1990.
90, 91, probably, yeah, somewhere in
Yeah.
there. But, if I had not seen and been drawn to the cover of this album that day, would I
Yeah.
have ever become an AMC super fan?
I don't. Is that a rhetorical question? Is that an actual question?
I need to know.
I well, you're asking the wrong person. I just don't know. I don't know. But what I can say, Jay William, is if
Yeah,
you had not been attracted to that album cover and become an American Music Club fan, then I would have never become an American Music Club fan because you
exactly.
definitely introduced me to American Music Club.
This is what I'm saying. So the
Well,
California album holds a dear place in my heart as a result of being the gateway for the rest of the discography for me, or at
yeah.
least the
Well,
early part of the discography. Anyway,
yeah. Well, listen.
great, great album. Great
We're going
album.
to
Not
talk
my
about
favorite.
that great cover. We're going to talk about that great cover in a second. Your segues are on point, just like they were last week. You're a fucking segue master, Jay William. You are a
Hey,
segue master.
hey, I am what, 5, 6 episodes in of my podcasting career now. I think I'm
Yeah.
starting to peak. I think I'm starting to hit my
Yeah.
peak.
It's
I've
good.
learned all the tricks of the trade.
Yeah.
I am the smoothest. I'm the funniest. I
Yeah.
always have my segues on point.
It really is amazing. You're a prodigy. You're a prodigy.
Thanks.
A prodigy. So you are a 50-something-year-old prodigy. Um,
That's right. If only podcasting had existed when I was a child and I could have been a child prodigy at
I
it.
know, I know. They would have sent you to Soviet Russia to study with a master podcaster who
Right.
would hit your fingers with a stick when you made a mistake when you were young, just a young Jay William podcasting.
Yet. I don't know
Net.
how to say I don't know how to say do it again in Russian. But
Tell them to smash the like button again. Tell them to subscribe again. Um,
so anyway, California. Let's talk about this cover because
well, hold
you
on.
know,
Let's give them the basics.
okay.
Released, Jay William. It was released November 10th, 1988. Grifter and Frontier. It
Mhm.
is currently out of print, but it
Yeah.
is available on the American Music Club Bandcamp. The link is in the show notes, as always. Please go over there and just pick it up. You can download a FLAC file. Um, I can't remember the price, but it is a low, low price, and it is definitely worth it. So please go and put some money into the pockets of our friends at American Music Club for all of the great songs that they've written here. All right, so the cover. Let's talk about the cover. It is a black and white photo. Well, listen, since you love since this was really your gateway, Jay William, why don't you
Yeah.
describe the cover for our listeners?
All right. So it is a dark green color, the album, and then in the middle of the dark green field, you have this evocative black and white photograph that
Yeah.
shows what appears to be just the base piece of like a bridge or some kind of
Yeah.
like building or structure, like large construction, but it's just showing like the bottom, like where the base of it is, but
Yeah.
it's sort of like tilted and it looks like it's dilapidated and falling apart. And there's all this scrub brush and this like arid Western
Yeah.
land around it. And I don't know, like there's just something about the photo, like, when I saw it in the bin, it made me stop and look at it. And I was like, oh, that's cool. When I was in high school, I was
Yeah.
taking art classes,
Yeah.
in my high school, and I got into making these, like, molded plastic sculpture things where it would just be like, you'd make a box and you'd pour it in there and and then you'd take the box off and I would chip at it and paint it and whatever. And this reminded me of one of my, like, high school plaster sculptures. I think that's
Yeah.
what made me stop and look at it.
Yeah.
and read the title and read the songs and whatever. I'd never heard of this band, but I was like, $2.90, I'm gonna buy it. And then,
Yeah.
um, but then we'll get into what I actually when I heard it, like what I
Yeah.
thought.
What you're so the photo, it is another Bobby Neal Adams photograph that's on the
Yeah.
cover. Same photographer that provided the photo that was on the cover of The Restless Stranger.
Right.
So, and when you compare the Restless Stranger cover and the California cover, much more kind of consistency. Those two seem to follow one another somewhat more logically, or they share an aesthetic a little bit more than Engine. I think Engine was a bit of an outlier.
Yeah.
I consider this cover very similar in vibe to the Restless Stranger cover. Now it doesn't have a dead animal on it, so it's a little less on the nose, but it definitely is this kind of stark, ghostly, somewhat desolate feel. Uh, and I do think it's quite evocative. I think it is an improvement on the Engine cover, but it is not a huge improvement. I like this cover. I don't love it. Can I tell you some of the issues I have with it? And then you
Yeah.
can provide a spirited defense.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay. So the vast openness of the landscape behind the dilapidated kind of concrete or whatever that is, that
Yeah.
arch. Um, I love that the vastness of that landscape and the desolation of that landscape. However, they've, as you pointed out, they kind of put this bluish gray kind of frame around the image, and I think
Do
that
you think of it as bluish gray,
you think of that as green.
like dark green, like a forest green?
It could be a dark green. I mean, I'm only looking at scans of the cover. I don't have a physical copy of it,
Is
but
this like one of those, like, is it a gold dress or blue dress, whatever
it is.
things?
It
Okay.
is. It is. So, but but there's a dark colored frame around the image, and I
Right.
think that frame acts to somehow constrain the vastness of the photo,
Mm.
right? It literally puts a block wall around the photo, cutting off the horizon. I would argue this would be a stronger cover if there was no framing around it, and that photo took up the entire cover. I think it would give you an additional sense of vastness and desolation that somehow is not there, not present because of that framing. Um,
You know what it
okay,
would look like kind of is the
yeah,
cover of, Eitzel's future solo album, 60-Watt Silver Lining, where
exactly.
it looks like it's a black and white photo kinda thing, and it
Yes,
would be similar to that.
yes,
Um,
yes. So to point one, do you have a defense, or will you concede the point, Jay William?
I will not concede the point because I
You suck at
always
it.
I always love this cover. Like, this is it might still be my favorite cover, at least to this point. 3 albums in, this is my
Yeah,
favorite cover of theirs.
yeah,
I thought that I don't know, the color was kind of unusual, and the photo was cool, and coupled with the back photo, the photo
yeah,
on the back cover is really awesome. I don't know
yeah,
if you could see
yeah,
that on mine,
yeah,
where
yeah,
it's like a flooded, there's obviously like a chain link fence and stuff sticking out of this like vast water,
yeah,
and there's a big storm cloud in the distance. I thought it, I thought it fit the sound of the band like
yeah,
so much better, and it like it added mystery, and it added a certain je ne sais quoi to
yeah.
like the whole picture. So I don't I'm not opposed to the border on the around the
Yeah.
photo,
Okay. Okay.
That
Well, that was artfully defended, Jay William, artfully defended.
yeah. I
Um,
don't
the second point I would make, and this is really more of a question, and I wrestled with this a little bit. I had a similar kind of feeling when I re-listened to the album and really did a deep dive, really went backtracking here. This cover, I like it, but it doesn't really give anything away, right? You could look at that cover. that could be it could be a metal band. It could be a band like American Music Club. It could be, jazz. You know what I'm saying?
True.
It isn't, it's evocative, but it isn't really narrowing at all. And I got to thinking, like, gosh, is that maybe one of the challenges commercially that American Music Club had throughout their career? Because when you listen to American Music Club, so many of these songs, and this is going to be a recurring theme for me as we talk about it track by track, so many of these songs are just entirely commercial from a songwriting perspective. And yet somehow there's some little thing that like kind of keeps you out, or like pushes you out a little bit. Or like makes them just a little bit out of reach. It has all of the component parts, but you can't quite put your finger on the thing that's maybe isn't present that would make it totally commercial, or isn't present that would make you be able to more easily define it as a genre. I think one of the challenges with American Music Club, I'm kind of trying to find my way to my point here, unfortunately, but like it's difficult to pinhole them into a single genre, but that's not because the music is so weird. You know what I mean? It's not like it's a band that you're just like, wow, I don't even know how to describe this, right? Like maybe like Sigur Rós or something like that, or like Mogwai. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it's
this is not post rock,
yeah,
you
no, not
know.
at all. I mean, if anything, it is like entirely, especially this album, most of this album is just like entirely pop country songwriting in so many
Mhm.
ways. But somehow or another, they evade easy definition. And I think this album cover evades easy definition. And it just got me wondering, like, is that maybe the core of what kept this band, you know, from being much, much more popular?
Yeah, I mean, because I've been thinking about this as well, and I think that there are clear examples where they had a song that could
Yeah.
have been a bona
Yeah.
fide hit outside this bar,
Yeah.
but they put a couple poison pills in there. One being they drop an F bomb.
Yeah.
Another they might have like a dissonant, squealy section a little bit.
Yeah.
Eitzel's performance style, his voice is very evocative, but it's unusual. You can't say like, oh, he sounds like Michael Jackson, or what I mean. He sounds like some known pop entity. Like his
Yeah.
voice is unusual, and I think that like some combination of those things, and on this album, I would argue like the production, while it's really it's clean and it sounds great, but there's like a little bit of like a lo-fi ish to it. Like it's not slick, and I
Mm.
think especially like coming in like 87, 88, like to get on the radio, like you had to have some slickness. Like even bands like the Replacements and
Yeah.
REM, and they were getting a little slicker and a little slicker and a little slicker, like with each
Yeah.
album. And as a result, their airplay was increasing, and I think that on this album, like this album doesn't sound quite as polished as Engine.
Oh,
You
all
know,
right. So
I
we are really getting into a point of I think disagreement, and this is fertile territory, Jay William. But once again, you have proven that you're a prodigy because you perfectly made a segue into the production and the arrangement. So I want to stick on this topic, but I do
okay.
want to just share. Okay, so Tom Mallon production once again. However, Tom Mallon also at this point has kind of semi-officially joined the band and is effectively the drummer at this point for the band.
Right.
Okay.
Drummer
So
and producer. Yeah.
yeah, drummer and producer. And the stories in Sean Body's book about the recording of this album, as we said in the scripted open, Eitzel moves into the studio. spends quite a bit more time with Tom Mallon, kind of in advance of the recording of the album. I think they build their relationship both personally, but certainly talk about what they both want to get out of the album. The other thing that's happening here is Eitzel is comfortably or uncomfortably, he is definitely stepping into the role of the kind of creative lead of the band. He is the sole songwriter on all of the songs on this album and really is kind of the counterpoint to Mallon kind of driving what this album is going to be creatively. But Mallon really, there are lots of stories in the Sean Body book about the band kind of being frustrated, having some conflicts with him, where they'll record some things or they'll do something in the studio. Mallon doesn't like it and just kind of takes it upon himself to completely change it. It does a lot of editing, does a bunch of overdubs himself. To the point where it was frustrating to the band in some ways. So with that backdrop, let's get back to this kind of production sound. You're making the argument this is a less clean, less
Not
pristine recording than Engine.
No, not less clean or pristine. Like everything sounds, good to great, but
Yeah.
it doesn't sound as slick. Like there's something that doesn't
Mm.
sound as jumping out of the speakers at you about it. Like I think
Yeah.
Engine, part of it is that, you know, and this is partially too, like, I don't know if you've seen there's a 7-part. Well, okay, first of all, Tom Mallon, he's no longer with us.
He
Rest in
is.
peace.
He rest in peace, passed away from glioblastoma some years ago, and we
Yeah.
mentioned this before. Unfortunately, the same kind of brain cancer that took Neil Peart. But, go ahead.
No. So he had a YouTube channel that is still up.
Oh,
And it's got a
really?
bunch, yeah, and it's got a bunch of AMC early relics, including a 7-part interview with Mark Eitzel
Oh, I've seen
taken
this. Yeah.
before, this was before California this was about a month before California was released.
Yeah.
And then there's like a promo video that they tried to put together, like, to promote
Yeah.
California and the band that was sort of based on the interviews and whatever. So anyway, like I watched all of them and I like took
Yeah.
notes, about what he was
Yeah.
saying and stuff. And it's interesting to me that it feels like at this point, yeah, like he is now sort of the primary songwriting force. I mean, he always was. They were trying to
Yeah.
like build his songs, but um you can almost feel this kind of like, he says something in the interview about like they tried to make everything perfect on the
Yeah.
previous album. Like
Yeah.
like, and when you listen to it, it is tight. Like that album, even though it doesn't sound like slick commercial or whatever, but everything is tight. The arrangements are tight. Like everything
Yeah.
is well thought through. There are
Yeah.
no bum notes,
Yeah.
and California is a little action to that. Like, what I gleaned from Eitzel's interview was that this one was a little more loose, and they were like, we're not gonna like sweat over every detail here. So
Yeah.
so the overall impression is that it's a little looser, rougher, not as like radio ready
Huh.
to my ears,
Yeah.
just I mean, we're talking like, a couple degrees,
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, all right. So my counterpoint to that is obviously this is highly subjective, right? My impression of California upon backtracking this, and this is really why I love backtracking, because I really kind of so frequently come away from the re-listens to some of these albums, especially when you do this in sequence like we're doing it, with a very different impression that I had kind of had in my memory. I think the production on this album is incredibly clean. It is substantially more spacious than the Engine production, right? There's
yeah.
just more space for silence. But I am going to make the argument that I think that this album feels too clean to me. I actually think it is not dirty enough. It feels this is a completely inappropriate metaphor that I'm going to use anyway. It's somehow the difference between a pure digital recording and someone recording on like an analog 16 track or something, right?
Right.
There is
Yeah.
a warmth to the less true, I think, capturing of the individual sounds that is a little bit difficult for kind of a layperson like me to describe, but I do think it's present. This album, I don't dislike the production, but I do feel like it just is somehow too clean and a little too
Once again, the
sterile.
word sterile is the word you're looking for.
Zero.
Yes.
Zero. Now, and I really listened to it and I was like, gosh, but it isn't true on all of the songs. It seems to me like Mallon, think about the production of Bad Liquor. I actually think the production of Bad Liquor is great production. I love the production of that song for that kind of song. I do not like that song on this album, but
Right.
I think that the production of that song for the kind of song that it is actually
Yeah.
is great. You know what I mean? And it
Yeah.
just made me and I actually think the song with the production that I like least on the album is Firefly, which I think for many people is like the kind of song off the album. It's like the single or the best
Right.
known, the best loved song on the album. And I just feel like the production feels uncomfortable with the kind of song that they're doing. Does that make sense?
hmm Um, yeah, I think yeah, on some I mean on some songs the production is spot on and on others it feels a little soft or weak or something. Like it doesn't have the impact somehow
It,
that
the
song.
theory that I built up in my head, and this may be totally wrong, but it really feels to me like the band on this album really feels as though they're settling into a direction that's much more consistent across songs, even though there is a wide variance in tone and type of songwriting and everything on this. It is getting more consistent and it's moving in a direction that is not the direction that Tom Mallon is interested in or best suited to be a producer for.
That
This
could be.
feels like an album to me where a producer and a band are kind of growing apart.
Yeah, that could be. I mean, Mallon, the fact that he was the drummer in the band, he
Yeah.
clearly, had a very heavy hand in arrangements, for
Yeah.
how this was going to go. And the thing, the one of the big differences between this album and the last album is just the material itself. Like, this album has more acoustic based
Yeah.
arrangements and more folky,
Yeah.
soft, picky kind of stuff. I mean, it still has Bad Liquor and it still has a couple other like,
Yeah.
more rock and kind of moments. But song for song, Engine is like the rock album and California is more like the folk album. And so I think like some of that, you know, perceived, oh, it's softer or whatever on my part
Yeah.
is just because the material is softer.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do, you know, I don't know what kind of music Tom Mallon wanted to make exactly. Like, one of the other things I found online is there's, from that same day that Mark Eitzel did the 7-part interview, there are video of 4 songs that they performed that night. The band
Oh
performed
yeah.
at the Hotel Utah in San Francisco, and Mallon is the drummer, and
Yeah.
it's interesting to watch those videos because it's just 4 songs, but like it's super informal because I think they were filming this specifically for this promo video that they were going to make for the album, and you can see Mallon's fiddling. He has like an 8-track recorder or something over on
Yeah.
the side, and Eitzel comes out and does like a solo acoustic version of "Here They Roll Down," which doesn't show up until the next album. And but like Mallon and Danny are wandering around on stage. There's no lighting or anything. It's
Yeah.
just like regular room lights. And but at this point also Lisa Davis was playing bass for them,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Danny was playing acoustic guitar, Voodoo on electric, Eitzel no guitar, so that he could just sing and focus on singing. But the body language and the vibe amongst the band is
It's
you
strange.
know, yeah, like you can tell like everything's not hunky
Yeah.
dory, like whether they're just nervous or they're you know at it beefing or whatever, like I don't know. The
Well,
long rant.
so I think that the last kind of general comments, and I'm going to build on some of the things you said about like the Engine being the rock album, this being more of a, you had said folk album. I think there are two things that really strike me here. Number one is pretty obvious, right? This album includes Bruce Caffin, not as a full member of the band, although he does kind of get adopted into the band after the
Yeah.
recording of this, but he appears on a number of tracks in it. And it is such a big instrumental change and addition that is consistent across the rest of the career that it really is kind of like a huge component of that feeling like, oh, AMC is finding their sound on this. I,
Yeah.
I actually think the inclusion of the pedal steel maybe oversells that point a little bit more than it should, but you have to kind of recognize it because the pedal steel is not something that you hear in a lot of kind of indie rock bands generally. And it is
Right.
so present in on this album, especially, like you start off Firefly. It is literally the first thing you hear on the album, right?
Yeah, but I wouldn't say it's overdone on I think he's only on a couple songs on this album. It's not the whole album.
No, I think
Um,
he's on 3 or 4 songs on the
maybe
album.
3 or 4, yeah. But I don't feel the pedal steel's dominant. I mean, the fact that it is the first thing you hear on the first song and it's so present in that song. I mean, it really enhances that. Well, do we wanna get into the first song?
No,
Are we
no,
re
I don't,
no?
because I've got
Okay.
one more general comment that I wanna make about the
Okay.
overall feel of the so
Okay.
you're saying it's a more folky song. I this is not something that I ever felt when I used to listen to American Music Club all the time. But since I've been backtracking and really this week listening to California, what struck me again and again is this is a fucking my understanding of this album is completely different. This is a Nashville singer-songwriters album. There are
It should
so
be.
many there are so many songs on this album that you're just like, "Holy shit." I
Oh,
can
yeah.
imagine Jason Aldean having a huge fucking hit with this song. You know what I mean?
Totally.
And
Yeah.
that is something that never occurred to me when I used to listen to it, but I mean, there are songs that like I'm just like, I cannot believe that more like maybe this is something that Eitzel just never wanted to do, but like I cannot imagine that like big country stars who generally work with, songwriters, the kind of classic Nashville songwriter. I can't believe that some of these songs have not been recorded by people like that because they just like I'm just like I kind of understand why the AMC version of this song maybe wasn't a hit at the time, but like
Yeah.
fuck like even today there's so many of these songs that I feel that this way. So I came away from this album like, God, this is a classic Nashville singer-songwriters album in the mode of like Chris Christopherson, Sturgill Simpson, Towns Van Sant, right? Like, or like a
Oh, yeah.
Ryan Adams, like you know what I mean? Like these real kind of singer-songwriter craftsmen in the
Yeah.
country vein, right?
I mean, I think that, even like there's all these like, kind of alternative country,
Yeah.
uh, female, you know, not just like Taylor Swift or whatever, but like, they could do I mean, Firefly is a beautiful, it could be done as a beautiful love song like by any country singer and it would be a smash. I mean,
Ab
so
absolutely, and
I mean, and the AMC catalog is just sitting there for the taking. Like, hey, Nashville, if you're out there, if you can hear us, I know
yeah,
that
no,
this podcast is huge in Nashville.
so I
Somebody
was
go
listening
and cover these songs and spread a little love back to Mr. Eitzel and the rest of the band. You know what I'm
no, I
saying?
mean, To your point, I've been listening to this Sierra Farrell. Have you, or Farrell? Farrell? I don't know how to say the last name, but this woman who
No.
basically just does kind of old school country, exactly the kind of person that you're thinking of. But I mean, yes, you could go into the slightly more kind of, alt country people, but I, I mean, so many of these songs, to your point, like Firefly, literally any
Ooh,
pop country artist could do that, and I'm certain to have a huge hit.
it's Angel Olsen. Angel Olsen, you've got to cover some American Music Club songs, and they will be huge.
Yeah.
They would
It
be
really,
perfect.
so many times when I was listening to this, I had this exact same thought. I was like, God, somebody should like put together, some Nashville producer should put together like a AMC. Well, I mean, if it's an AMC tribute album, I think it actually probably would do less well.
Well,
But I absolutely think these songs could be hugely popular.
I did discover that I actually have an AMC tribute album that was put out in like 99 or 2000 with all
Yeah,
these different, you know.
I remember
Uh,
that, but it was mostly kind of alternative, like
yeah,
indie. Yeah,
it
yeah.
was. Um, but anyway, um,
All right, so it sounds like we're violently in agreement on that point, right? That really this is in some ways a good way to think about this album, or at least we can a framework to
yes,
think about it as we go
yes.
track by track. Is this is really it really is Eitzel in this kind of pure Nashville singer songwriter mode, not on
This
every
is
song, but on a lot of songs.
this is the album that makes people say like, "Oh, American Music Club, they're alt country." You know, like
Yeah,
this album feels more alt country in the AMC Venn
yeah.
diagram.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. All right, so with that, should we dig into this song that we've been previewing it. We've mentioned it a couple of times already. It is the
We've been
opening
dancing
track on
around.
side A. Should we get into it?
Let's do it.
All right. 2 minutes and 49 seconds. Eitzel, singer, Eitzel, songwriter, Eitzel, lyricist, Firefly. Let's go.
Come on, beautiful, we'll go sit on the front lawn. We'll watch the fireflies as the sun goes down. They don't live too long, just a flash and then they're gone. We'll laugh at them and watch the sun go down. You're so pretty, baby, you're the prettiest thing I know. You're so pretty, baby, where did you go?
All right, Jay William, there we are. What do you even say about that song?
Well, okay, so this was the first like album that I ever heard of AMC. I knew nothing about them. I put it on, and the first thing I hear is the pedal steel.
Yeah.
And, it perked my ears up because I was just like, oh, like I thought that this might be a country-ish band just based on the song titles and stuff. But yeah, I mean it's a gorgeous song, and it's more gentle and pop than anything AMC has kind of done up to this point, but it's decidedly country pop because of the pedal steel.
I mean, listen, why don't we start with the music and then we can go backward into the lyrics. That's where we started, just organically.
Yeah.
I completely agree. The pedal steel announces the tone of this album. It is such an interesting choice that they put this track as the first track and the pedal steel is the first thing that you hear. It is especially kind of within that time frame and within this, this kind of college rock world. You got to remember this is, but this predates Uncle Tupelo, I believe, right? Or I mean, at least they weren't
Yeah.
out putting out records yet, right? They were
Yeah.
maybe listed, but
Yeah,
so
this definitely predates Uncle Tupelo, yeah.
there was not like the alternative alt country, whatever you want to call it. That really wasn't a thing prior to this album.
No.
And certainly country music was big, but it was not big within people who listen to college radio.
Are you ready for me to go on just a brief tangent? And I hope that I don't know, like in the show notes, like, do you put a list of other like bands or things that we talk
No.
about or whatever?
No,
Okay,
I don't.
anyway.
No, but we can do that. We can do that. You can,
I think it's a good idea because we go on these tangents and we mention these other bands or whatever. But anyway, the band I want to mention from that time, which I think like one of the things that perked my ears up at hearing Firefly was this band Dump Truck. Do
Yeah.
you remember Dump Truck, or do you remember that I loved Dump Truck?
I remember that you liked Dump Truck, but I don't think I ever heard Dump Truck, or I don't
Dump
remember
Truck.
if I did.
Well, they had put out an album in '87 called For the Country that is very much in line with like AMC Engine, like just sound wise. It's sort of like alternative country, but like kind of heavier guitars and you know weirder lyrics and stuff. But the sort of single from that album was a song called Going Nowhere that had this awesome pedal steel solo, just kind of during the bridge or whatever. So I really loved that song and I loved that album. And then I heard this and was kind of like, you know, because it was like the only other bands I can think of in the alternative world at that time. I mean, I'm sure there were some here and there, but I think of like Camper Van Beethoven, I think, you know, definitely did some pedal steel stuff. And they, you know, West Coast also, you know, California band. So I don't know, something in the water. Chris Isaac, you know, was going on in San Francisco at that time. And, you know, he definitely.
There are certain instruments that I think at this time, if you had these instruments on your recording, you were immediately pigeonholed in a certain way, right? It's like if you had banjo, pedal steel, you know, lap steel, or like dobro or something, like probably you were going to get categorized in a certain way. In the same way that like if you had a trombone, whether you were a ska band or not, you were somehow going to be compared to like ska, you know what I'm saying? And I think that was an unfortunate kind of reality of the way that people thought about music back in those days. But there's no question that like putting pedal steel on an album, even though it's really beautiful, is like a strong choice for the band. They must have known, like, God, we have this pedal steel on here. We're going to be thought of in a certain way after this, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, they must have considered that. You know, it sounds like for Engine, just from Eitzel's interview, reading between the lines, it felt like that was like their attempt to make like sort of as commercial as they could make it sounding album. And then it didn't do what they expected it to do. And so they were kind of deflated and they were sort of like, we're just going to, you know, do what we want. And, you know, they come in with sort of a more country leaning thing. You know, but it certainly wasn't going to appeal to pop radio like a pedal steel, you know?
Well, I mean, listen,
this is before Nashville country pop even was a thing, you know?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But it predates, it predates Garth Brooks, which I'm not, I don't want to pretend that I'm an expert in country music, but it does seem that over this period of time, there was a real change in kind of what country meant within the broader music industry. It's like once Garth Brooks kind of happened and had these huge mega hit albums, kind of a
crossover.
Crossover albums, country music kind of bifurcated into like more traditional country. And then there was the glossy, Shania Twain, Garth Brooks, Taylor Swift stuff ultimately, right? The kind of like Taylor Swift that has more of a heritage. Again, as someone with zero expertise in any of this, I'm going to make the argument Taylor Swift, if you follow her family tree down, you're going to get to like Shania Twain and Garth Brooks. And then there's this other family tree that kind of goes down into, Hank Williams and more, traditional country musicians.
So here's something that I think is curious, though. Here's a curious question I have. So when we, traced Eitzel from his sort of like songwriting roots and we talk about his background and stuff, I don't recall there being a lot of like, oh, he was into country music growing up. Or
where did it come from? Where did this come from?
Yeah, so it's like, I don't know, like, could that have been influence from Voodie and Danny, who had been playing in like country western kind of things from what I understand. So
you've got to ask that.
Maybe, because the only person that I know Eitzel was super into around this time was Nick Drake.
Yeah. But
And I'm
this
sure
does
there
not
were other
sound like
things,
a
but
Nick Drake song. You know what I mean? Like the songwriting here, again, I'm gonna get back into it. There is nothing in this. If you just strip away all the performances and just like think about the song, just the song, there is nothing in this song that I cannot imagine Jason Aldean. I'm saying Jason Aldean because he's just somebody that I'm aware of that's like kind of a Garth Brooksy type character
yeah.
today. Um, there is nothing that would seem even a little bit out of place in this song. I don't think. I just it is totally down the middle pop country songwriting, I think.
Yeah, I'm trying to let me where's the lyrics? Let me get these lyrics up
All
here.
right. And then I don't like I said before, I don't like the production on this. I like the band's performance a lot, but the production of this song just is too sterile for me. It feels a little I want a little bit more sauce on this on
Yeah,
this
it feels a
recording.
little underproduced. The interesting thing about this song on the album is that this is the only one that Lisa Davis plays bass on. So she was in the
Yeah.
band for, it seems like, just a period of months leading up to California. She recorded the bass part on this song. So I assume Danny's playing, like, there's a more kind of folky, you can hear
Yeah.
some acoustic kind of elements going on. Um, and they had the pedal steel like there, and I don't know how they recorded this, if they did it all live in a room or whatever, but that creates a different vibe, already from what was on Engine. It's a different set of players,
Yeah.
and then it's also different from the rest of the album. And so maybe, you know, yeah, it feels like it needs another layer or something on it to kind of like
Yeah.
give it a little more lift. Like it feels a little tentative or something. But even so, the catchiness and the beauty of the song, like, obviously
Yeah.
shines through. This is a lot of people's favorite AMC song of all time. So,
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those songs that if you go and see the band live or just Eitzel live now, right? Like there'll probably be somebody who's like calling out for this song to be played.
oh yeah.
Um,
Um,
so
little known. Can I give a little personal? Can I give a
okay,
personal?
personal, of course. That's what backtracking is all. It's the personal and historical. So please,
I have only in my life ever performed at a open mic night, like, one time, and it was
really,
during yeah, it was during college. It was either late freshman year or early sophomore year, and me and another guy at, college did open mic performance where we did 3 songs, and this was
yeah.
one of Firefly was one of the songs that we did.
Wow, wow,
Yeah.
wow. Well, so the lyrics. I want to talk about the lyrics here. Again, lyrically, it is perfect. Like there are a lot. Like I think that one of the things that you could say to counter the argument that I've been making that this is just like these songs are just bait for somebody kind of commercially successful in Nashville to re-record.
Yeah.
One of the things you could say is lyrically they tend to be a lot of these songs tend to be a little bit challenging in one way or another. But even the lyrics to this song, I think, are perfect, like Nashville lyrics. I mean,
Well,
you have these. All right, so I'm gonna describe it. It's maybe a little gothic, but the first verse is so sweet and hopeful. And then the second verse is like, the first verse, he's taking care of baby, whoever baby is. You're so pretty, baby. He's taking care of baby. Second one is, what's wrong with baby? What's the issue with baby? And then the third one is pretty hopeless, right? Like the overwhelming dream that's killing us. So, but I love that progression in the song, and it feels somehow appropriate for, a popular country song to me. You're making a face like you don't like that, like you smelled the turd.
no, 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 the only thing I wanna point out is that I think one of the things that maybe prevents a Mark Eitzel song from being, like, a smash Nashville hit
Yeah.
is lines like, "Are you waiting for Sister Midnight to anesthetize?" Like,
Yeah,
that
it's a great
that's a
line though.
it's an incredible line, but for, like, Nashville pop, like that's a difficult line, that would
Yeah.
be, so it would have to be like a progressive country person who could
Yeah.
tackle lyrics
Sturgill
like that,
Simpson. Sturgill
other
Simpson.
than other than that, I mean, yeah, like super catchy chorus.
Yeah.
It's got that tinge of sadness as
Yeah.
well as beauty. Like, I mean,
And I
it's
mean,
a great
the
it's a great opener for the album. I want to
it's
point that
like
out.
the Firefly metaphor is something that we've all heard in a bunch of different places before, but somehow it works really well in here. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't come across as cloying, even though I do think the Firefly thing could be. I just think it works. It works great. It's a really well crafted song, in my opinion.
Yeah, so the other thing that you can find out there on the YouTubes are some AMC live performances that happened in between Engine and California. And so
Yeah.
you can kind of hear a little bit how this song evolves. Um,
Yeah.
and so in one of or I maybe it's in the interview with him, he talks a little bit about the song, and I guess it's not about like always thought it was just like fireflies like lighting up and going dark, and it's like you're so pretty, where did you go, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But he says it's about fireflies getting zapped, in like their neighbor had like a zapper out.
No, I just
Yeah.
don't believe it.
Yeah,
No.
but then when you go back and read it, it's like, okay, like, they don't live too long, just a flash and then they're gone. We laugh at them, while we're watching the
Yeah.
sun go down, or you know what I mean? And so, like, I was
Yeah.
kinda like, "Oh, man," like, I mean, it's a little bit darker
Yeah,
than
yeah.
it reads maybe, but, yeah, and then it does kind of go to a hopeless place, which I don't know if, I don't know if Nashville country songwriters do that where they start hopeful and then they get, like, less hopeful as they go in a song, but, I mean,
No.
great song, great opener for the album.
Great opener. Great opener. It really sets an interesting tone for the album. But Jay Williams, should we move on to track 2?
Yeah, but, just one element that I wanna point out of Firefly
Yeah.
as well is also sort of like a commercial, like, killer probably, is they do this thing on this album on more than 2 songs where
Yeah.
the bridge, everything drops out on the bridge.
Yeah.
Like, usually
Yeah.
the bridge of a song is where everything almost, like, reaches the climactic point of the song, and then it's sort of like the rest of the song's the denouement, right? But,
Yeah.
like, on this album, they have several songs where the song's kinda going and it peaks and valleys, and then the bridge, it just all drops out, and it's almost
Yeah.
like ambient,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so this is the first song where they do that, and that's, like, the least commercial, element of the song. It's like where everything almost sounds like, "Wait, is the song over?" And it's like, then they come back in. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. Here we go.
All right. Yeah, it does. I mean, but that bridge, that little breakdown in that bridge, and then they come back in with the with another verse part, right? But there's that
Yeah,
beautiful pedal steel solo over the verse part, which is just awesome. But
yeah.
again, it is like unapologetically country, especially when you consider it within the context of the time and I think the general genre that they're working in, which calling it a genre is maybe not the right thing to call it, but like within this world of indie college rock, right? A screaming pedal steel solo was not something that you heard by anybody in
Right.
that world at that time.
Now tell me, because I don't know, Bruce Caffin, you say he played with Voodie, prior
Yeah,
to this?
yeah. So Bruce Caffin, again, off the top of my head from the Sean Body book, Bruce Caffin was friends with Voodie, and this is like prior to Voodie being in the Farmers, or maybe concurrent to the Farm, but like in that kind of like pre-Eitzel moving to San Francisco, they were playing together in country and western cover bands that would play in like kind of roadhouses south of San Francisco. They specifically mentioned Half Moon Bay, which is where I lived for a long time. But yeah, and to understand I don't know what it was like in the mid '80s. That was well before I moved there. But Half Moon Bay, even when I lived there in kind of the very early 2000s, although it's only about 40 minutes from San Francisco, there are a lot of ranches out there. You know what I mean? And it really, was, it isn't so much anymore, but it was when I first moved there. And I would imagine earlier on, it was as close to kind of cowboy country as I think you could get south of San Francisco until you got, way down into the, Central Valley, kind of past Gilroy and all that. So you can kind of imagine like these were not San Francisco hipster kind of playing at country music type things, right? This was much more like the people who probably went to hear them play really wanted, they didn't want irony. Yeah. They wanted country music. All right. So why don't we do it? Jay William, why don't we move on to track 2 on this album? It is Somewhere. It is 3 minutes and 1 second long. Let's just give it a listen.
She sinks into the captain's chair. I don't think that she really cares. If somewhere, somewhere,
Okay, we have got to dig into these lyrics because they are incredibly imagistic. And when I read over these lyrics for the first time in a long time, this is how it struck me. It is very evocative of Thunder Road. If you think about the lyrics to Thunder Road, it feels a lot like the Bruce Springsteen song Thunder Road. It feels a lot like Thunder Road, but without hope. You know what I mean? Thunder Road has this incredibly hopeful, but like very kind of imagistic feel in the beginning. This has a similarly imagistic feel, but it is just kind of without any of the Thunder Road hope.
Yeah, like the music wise, especially this song is very Springsteenian. Big chorus. And it does on the surface, it sounds like, somewhere, like, there's people living, but like when you hear the verses and everything, it's like, ooh, like, this is a rough, alcohol soaked kind of stumble that he's going through here.
Yeah, it really is. It's funny. I think you had mentioned the Springsteen connection in one of the previous episodes. It was not anything that I had ever really kind of been in touch with when thinking about American Music Club, but it is a much more I don't want to say it's an influence because I have no idea if Eitzel liked Springsteen at all, but you definitely, there are things in some of these songs that are pretty evocative of Springsteen, or you certainly can imagine kind of Springsteen doing some of these songs.
Yeah, it's like a seedier Springsteen, like, I mean, Springsteen sings about like, working class, desperate people who, are struggling and, but Eitzel, like, Eitzel is more honed in on like barflies, like the Bukowski kind of like thing, like the inner city, so I think that's what kind of like, that's more his lane, at least in some of these early songs. I mean, he has so many songs that are about like bars and drinking. And in fact, this one, I wanted to point out in the lyrics, the chorus is, somewhere there's people living. And I thought that reminds me of Outside This Bar. Outside this bar, there's no one alive. Like just that idea of living versus dying or whatever. And, whether it's in an alcohol soaked world or outside of the alcohol world or whatever, like, this is sort of like a theme a little bit.
Yeah. So the last thing on the lyrics that 2 points that I want to make before moving on to I don't have too much to say about the music, but I love the line in this one. You can be Miss Bottom Lip bottomless pit of 1983 and I can be Mr. Out Like a Light. It's funny. It's incredibly unusual. It is so descriptive. And like when he says it, like it's just like the whole thing kind of coalesces. And it captures so many things of like kind of the sadness, the desperation, but the funniness and the kind of weird joy in that. Like it's just such a loaded line. I love it. It's just classic great Eitzel lyric writing.
Well, I'm
And
glad you pointed out, like, the fact that it's humorous, like,
yeah,
because I think that, like, similar to someone like Morrissey or whatever, who everybody's like, oh, his lyrics are all depressing, miserable, whatever. But if you actually dig into them, like, there's so much humor
yeah,
woven throughout all of it. And it's the same with Eitzel, like,
yeah, totally.
and there are a lot of examples on this album and, each of their albums, but a line like that is, it's really funny. It's
Yeah.
just funny.
Yeah,
It's just
yeah.
funny, man.
And then there's one other thing that I would say is there's some sections in here where the lyrics don't flow very well. Like there are too many words jammed into a line, or the flow is just a little bit awkward. It is, I'm not criticizing it necessarily, but it is definitely a trademark of Eitzel. That is something that occurs throughout the career, right? You're going to hear moments of that. That's not a bug, it's a feature, I guess is one way to say it. It's just one of the things that I think is unique about his songwriting.
Um, I have notes on this one about the production as well, where I feel
Okay.
like the production is underwhelming on this
Oh,
song. Like it needed to be bigger, and now like that we're getting into it, I'm thinking about like the songs where the production sounds great on this album are the
yeah.
soft, quiet, like acoustic, finger picky kind of things. And the ones where it needed to be more muscular and bigger, like this song should have been bigger, like it's got this great big chorus, and yeah, and it actually like on the third verse, like you start to hear like Voodie almost gets like punk rock
Yeah.
sounding, like he's like
Yeah.
chugging on this like distorted guitar thing, and and somehow it just doesn't like lift off the way that you feel like it should or whatever.
Yeah, it's funny. I think you and I have a similar view of the production of this album, but it almost sounds as though we have an opposite opinion on what
Oh,
songs work best. Although I would agree, I do not like the production on this song, but mostly my issue with this is the mix. I think the mix on this song is horrible.
ah,
It has just an overwhelming muddiness. The drums are substantially too low in the mix, and you just end up with a kind of an undifferentiated like rumble,
mhm.
which I don't like. So I think we're in agreement that the production on this one is not great, but generally I will say that I think my sense, and again, I could be totally wrong about this, but my sense is that Mallon, because of his punk background, tends to be more comfortable with punk, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the space that he probably operated most. And so when a song like Firefly comes around, I think it's cleanly produced, but there isn't any atmospheric element to it, that just somehow the warmth that you would want from that song is just not present in the production.
Yeah, and not to like, slag the production on this or whatever, because it's just like some songs don't feel quite whatever, but it's a shame in a way that like the opening a little bit of like a underwhelming uh sound to them or whatever,
Yeah.
because there it's a strong 1-2 openers, but like it needed some sort of special sauce or whatever to get it like to that you know more
Yeah.
powerful opener for the album. But having said that, we quibble. These are
We do.
quibbles.
Listen, we're backtracking. I mean, listen, we've
Hey,
chosen American Music Club because we absolutely love them. We think they're an incredible and an important band. That is the endorsement that we're giving the entire catalog by spending many months of our time on doing this. However, obviously there are going to be some quibbles that we have. We're going to point
yeah,
out some faults. And if you can't hear a fucking fault, then why don't you go fuck yourself?
Yeah, listen, just deal with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Hey, the one thing I want to point out about this is somewhere along the line, I found out that the song somewhere is about a bar in Columbus called Andy's Pub, which I believe is the same bar that he's singing about and outside this bar. So I do think there's a strong tie between, like, this is almost like a sequel or something to that song.
And has Andy's Pub is long gone.
Yes, Andy's Pub is now, oh geez, it's not. I don't even know. It's not a pub or anything like
Not,
that now.
it's like a dry cleaner or something.
Yeah, it's on High Street right by campus, like, where
Yeah.
all of the action was back in the day. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's probably a Panera Bread.
something like that. Totally.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, with that, should we move on to Laughingstock, the third
Yes.
track on side A? This is 4 minutes and 17 seconds. Why don't we give it a quick little listen?
Never weak, always strong. That's hard for some. That's hard for some. You ask me why. You ask me why.
All right, Jay William. I want to talk about the lyrics. I personally never even, read the lyrics to this song. I vaguely knew certain parts of the lyrics just from knowing the song. But I've got to say, this set of lyrics was the best surprise for me on backtracking this album. Lyrical surprise.
Well, tell me more. What surprised you?
Listen, it was pretty concise. Now, the image that I had in Laughingstock was this is a pretty clear image of Eitzel explaining himself to two well-meaning people in a bar who he really never feels like he's going to be able to connect with. They just have a very different kind of experience of the world, but similarly, they're kind of kindly trying to relate to him, and he is kind of, despite the futility of it that he may be aware of, is trying to articulate his own kind of worldview to them. I just read it, and I just like that whole scenario just kind of wholesale entered my head. Now, subjective certainly, but it was concise, and it really painted that clearly for me. And so I don't know, I just really I liked it. It was a articulation of kind of a single experience.
So I think you're correct, because I feel like somewhere along the way I found out that is kind of the story of it. It's about, like, talking to a couple in a bar, and
Yeah.
I don't know if they were like, uh, what they called people back in the yuppies. Were they yuppies? My
Yuppies.
impression somehow is that it was like a yuppie couple, and
Yeah.
he was kind of, sitting in a bar drinking and got to talking to them, and just
Weird.
was feeling that they do not connect, like
Yeah.
he's not on the same wavelength or whatever.
Yeah. We're both in this bar. We're all in this bar. We're all doing the same thing, but somehow or another, we're not, the same.
Yeah. So the thing that really strikes me, like, listening to this album for the first time, I think, the first song was like, oh, it's country, and then the second song was almost like, it almost sounded like REM-ish,
Yeah.
and then it's a serious mood change for this song. Like, this
Yeah.
is like slowcore country kind of deal,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
I think
it's
this
like
is
all
the-
atmosphere. The whole thing is atmosphere. Like, the music is all atmosphere, and he's just like in this meditative kind of like thing above it,
Yeah. Yeah. I have to say, I love American Music Club in the slowcore mode generally. And I definitely appreciate the influence that they had on so many bands that I love, right? And I do recognize that there is some of that in this. But for the like, I have to be honest, the music of this song is it's not one of my favorites on the album. It's an example of a song that I think is a pretty good, there's like a real good kind of core there, kernel there, but I think they just didn't quite find the right arrangement for this one. You know what I mean? That there are a couple of songs on this album where I have that same feeling, where it's like, we talked about this, especially, when listening to the demos in and around The Restless Stranger. There's the sense that in a bunch of cases, they kind of took these nuggets of songs from Eitzel and just tried them a million different ways to try and figure out like what the right tone and arrangement was. This is an example for me where it just feels a little bit like that kind of happened, but they didn't quite nail it.
Well, that's interesting because, I was listening to those live shows that
Yeah.
happened earlier in 1988 where they were still kind of developing a lot of the stuff that wound up on California. And the
Yeah.
arrangement of Laughingstock on one of those performances, the chorus is much bigger. Like
Really?
they go, it's almost like, they do like the kind of meditative verse and then they go huge on the chorus and it's too big. It's too
Yeah.
big. It's like they were trying to figure out what to do with this. And what they wound up doing on the album is this almost like, I mean, it's almost, like trance like chorus, where the drums kind of go to this like tom kind of like
Mhm.
tribal kind of sounding thing. And I think it's better, it's better than what they were trying to do in those live shows. And this is something about all of the material on this album is, we talked about in the first albums where they were sort of primarily like a live act and Eitzel's, emotional, the big rises and falls of his physical performance was a big part of early AMC, and they were trying to figure out how to convey that in just an album. And I think this is the first album where they kind of like a lot of the material is not
That.
live material. It's
Yeah.
not, you know what I mean? It's
Agreed.
more kind of
It
I don't
doesn't.
know.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like I think I'm. Tell me if you think that this is a fair kind of restatement of what you mean. A lot of the songs on the early albums feel as though they had these wild jams live, right? That really were just kind of these big live experiences that they ended up trying to figure out a way to kind of like capture on an album, and that required some amount of structure and constraint and like boxing it up a little bit, and it doesn't it seems like it never works as well on album as it probably did live. But I think there are fewer and fewer examples of that as you go deeper into the catalog. Is that a fair? Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And like I can see what you mean about this one not being it feels a little undercooked in some way.
Yeah.
But I do enjoy like really enjoyed backtracking it
Yeah.
and I hadn't listened to this album in years and the layers, I listened to it on headphones and stuff and so
Yeah.
like just hearing all of the different guitars overdubbed and stuff on this, I think this album places a greater emphasis on Eitzel's finger picking
Yeah.
versus Engine did not have as much of that as like a primary, sound. But
Yeah.
like this song is like, it's almost like mantra like it's just
Yeah.
floats, the whole
Yep.
song.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually, I think I agree with what part of what you're saying here, Jay William. This is one of those songs that I'd mostly forgotten about until backtracking it. And and on re-listen, I like it a lot better than I remember liking it. I don't it's one of those songs that I think on my when I first got into American Music Club, it just kind of got overshadowed by some of the other real highlights on this album, but it's a much better song than I remember. I like it quite a bit. I don't think it's fully cooked. I don't think it's an AMC classic necessarily, but it is a better song than I in my memory gave it credit for.
It's a strange song too. Like some of the arrangement choices I think are really cool. Like I never sort of realized the part where it stops and it's just voice and a finger snapping. He's like laughing so. And then it's like you're like, oh, the song's over. And then suddenly it comes back in and they go into this whole like extended folky, picky
Yeah.
acoustic ambient jam. And
Yeah.
um and I just thought that was so cool, like that felt very different, than anything else I was listening to at the time. So
Yeah.
um yeah, I've forgotten about that. So backtracking it was enjoyable.
Excellent. All right. So shall we move on to the fourth track on?
Yes,
on
we shall.
Lonely. So this is Lonely. 2 minutes and 42 seconds. Jay William, why don't we give it a spin?
Devil in my throat to come up. And you get so nervous that everything's a joke. If I have to be this lonely, if I have to be this lonely, if I have to be this lonely, I may as well be alone.
All right, there we go. Now, this, Jay William, the verses of this are a little all right, so I'm going to go back to my kind of Nashville. He is like a Nashville song craftsman.
Oh yeah.
Think about Eitzel as the Nashville song craftsman. The verse lyrics are a little rough for that, but oh my God, is this not a classic Nashville pop chorus?
Oh
If I
yeah.
have to be so lonely, I may as well be alone. I mean, that is like up there with people say I've got a drinking problem. Like that is such a classic Nashville chorus, right?
Yeah, that's a total like Hank Williams kind of song title, chorus kind of thing. And it's got this great kind of country,
Yeah.
well, golly, okay. Eitzel has a certain sometimes he puts on what I feel the word that pops into my head is corn pone. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like a corn
Yeah.
pone voice. It's like, well, it's like he's got it's kind of a hee haw kind of, and I feel like every album has had one or two of
Yeah.
those kind of songs, and this is like the first instance of the corn pone voice. But I mean, there have been country elements in the previous three songs, but he sang them more straight, like not
Yeah.
corn pone. But this one is more like, well, come on, come on, folks. Like,
Yeah. I mean,
but I mean, I like the song. It's catchy. It's fun. It's fun. Which is a side that you don't get a lot of fun.
yeah.
MC.
I mean, this is a really like when again, this is another one of these songs on this album that I kind of had forgotten a little bit about, right? And on re-listen, I'm not gonna say that this is one of my favorite songs on the album. It is. It definitely isn't. But God, it is like a well-crafted little country song, and I can totally imagine someone else recording this and it being like a hit. I mean, it just is like it's all right there. I don't love the instrumentation on it, but it is a fairly straight country song. Has a fairly straight country vibe in it. Um, I don't know. I mean, it was a total surprise to me on re-listening to it. I just did not remember. I guess really what I'm saying, kind of the through line here is so many of these songs when I re-listened to them, I was like, shit, this is basically just a country album with all these
Yeah.
little country gems on it. And yeah, some of them are a little off kilter, but like off kilter is not the dominant vibe here. The dominant vibe, at least on my re-listen to it, is like kind of straight country songwriting.
Yeah, I mean, it presents as a country song, but when you dig into the lyrics a little bit, it's like some of
Sure.
them are a little like, what's going on? Like um the one that I was just it's like first of all, so I go back to my
Yep.
room by the freeway, which
Yeah.
clearly he was living somewhere that was right next to a freeway because he wrote like here they roll down, and
Yeah.
there are freeway references like in a
Yeah.
handful of songs. I fall into my bed like snow. Beautiful,
Yeah.
poetic,
Yeah.
like the cold I never woke you. And a killer followed me home. hey, what song you whistling? Like that is a strange turn, right there. Like, so I don't know if I can hear like, I keep reaching for Taylor Swift. I don't know. I
Yeah,
don't,
yeah,
I'm not up on current country stars or whatever, but,
yeah,
like that would be a strange thing to hear on pop
yeah,
country radio probably. But,
yeah,
other than that, like the song
yeah,
totally like country pop gen.
yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. I mean, really, but I guess it's just this. For a band that I think in some ways maybe I used to think of as inaccessible or more difficult to kind of get inside of, right? Like not a band that you could just kind of casually throw on for a friend and they're going to like listen to it while kind of half paying attention and be like, "Oh yeah, what's this? This is awesome." Like
Yeah.
I always kind of had the sense that that was never American Music Club. Like the best way to get somebody into it was to like put it on a mix and then very quietly say to them, "This is a very important
Right.
musician that I'm sharing with
You,
you." But
you need to
maybe that's
listen to
just
this alone while you're
oh,
sitting in the
right?
shower in the dark.
But I totally had that feeling. But I'm now wondering, is like that just totally the wrong way to think about this band? And it's somehow much less heavy. Like the heaviness is there, but that it should maybe be thought of after the like more kind of like all of the
Yeah.
normal things about the band.
AMC contains multitudes. There's
It's
light and there's dark.
yeah,
So
yeah,
yes, this is a more like light moment. These lyrics are funny, like they're charming and funny.
yeah.
So again, sort of like not something you necessarily think of right away with Eitzel as a lyricist, but you know,
Yeah. Now, all right. So, shall we move on to one of the one of the songs that really puts the lie to everything that we just said?
yes, please.
Pale Skinny Girl. This is 3 minutes and 33 seconds of very alarming music. So, why don't we just give it a listen? All right, let's talk about the lyrics first, Jay William.
Yeah.
These are very opaque lyrics. These were the most opaque, inaccessible lyrics on the album for me, although it is really impossible to deny that that chorus lyric is just haunting.
Yeah, I can tell you exactly what Eitzel said the song was about.
Okay, please.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, so in that 7-part interview or whatever that's online, they ask him about this song, and he says it's a true story, and it was like they were on the road somewhere, and they had stopped to, like, use the bathroom at some
Yeah.
place, and there was something called Triangle Furniture, which I don't know if that's like a furniture stores or something, and they were
Let's hope it's
parked.
just the name, because triangle furniture sounds uncomfortable to me. I mean, triangle couch, like, that sounds
It's
awful.
all points. It's all points. Where do you sit? Um, yeah, so they were stopped at a place to use the restrooms, and the restroom was really gross, and he was like hanging out in the parking lot because he was feeling pee shy. This is what he said in the interview. And he didn't want to use the bathroom or whatever, and he saw a girl kind of come wander across the parking lot or something, and
Yeah,
that's what he's
yeah,
singing about in,
yeah,
and the portrait that the lyrics paint is just of this, like, you see this pale, skinny girl, like, in the night walking across this parking lot, and you're just like, you feel pity. It seems like something isn't right there, and, that at least that's the impression that I got, from the lyrics.
yeah, yeah. It is, I think it's one of the examples on here where the kind of somewhat less accessible lyrics and that really haunting kind of chorus line and the music overall, it is exactly not the kind of traditional Nashville pop songwriting that I've been talking about, but this is one of the ones that I think is the best slowcore song on the album. This is a this is a real slowcore song, and I love it. I think it's like a perfect embodiment of that.
So I have a note here, and you know, throwing back to an earlier episode, I have a note here that this song reminds me of David and David.
Okay, yeah, of course. Why wouldn't it?
You remember me talking extensively about David and David
Sure.
in the you know, previous episode. There's something about the vibe of this that's just this, like, you know, dark, like contemplative,
Yeah,
heavy.
yeah,
You know, there's no light in this song. I mean, the only light is that the music is really lovely. Like, you know, there's like this really nice atmospheric kind of stuff,
yeah.
but it's a heavy vibe, you know?
It is. It's a very heavy vibe. I mean, this really, you know, for as much as we've talked about, and it has been written, and it's certainly in the Wikipedia that people cite AMC as kind of the, you know, one of the main influences for, you know, slowcore and all of those bands. The majority of the music that they made, I would argue, is not like that, right? But they do have songs here and there that undeniably fit that categorization really well, and this is certainly one of them.
I mean, they were unafraid to put a really heavy thing in front of an audience.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
and I mean, you know, and as we've said, like this wasn't all that they did. They had all kind of, you know,
sure.
I mean, like I said, they contain multitudes. That's why they're a great band. But like, you know, this is as sort of like a downer as
Yeah,
like Cure, you know, like early Cure, you know, like where it's just like heavy. It's goth almost, you know,
yeah,
like
yes,
in tone. You know, there's
yeah,
no lightness to it at all.
yeah,
And I do think that, I mean, especially when you put this up against something like Firefly and then Bad
yeah,
Liquor. And you
yeah,
know, I mean,
totally
it's a
different.
little, yeah, I mean, this band is doing a lot of different things, you know, all
Yeah,
on
that's
one
right.
album.
That's right. Now, I will say that I've said it. I love this guitar. I love the slowcore thing. I really love the approach to the guitars on this song, and I think that approach to the guitars is probably the most prototypical slowcore thing about this song. I do have a quibble with the production in one spot. There is way too much reverb on the drums, and yet there is zero sustain from the cymbals, and it is an awful drum sound in my opinion. I
Oh,
just
that's interesting.
I do not like it at all.
Because the producer was playing the drums, you know,
No.
like he, you know, chose, I mean, he must have known what sound he was going for.
Well,
I actually I don't know that I don't like the drum sound, but I like the drum part. Like you know, he has that whole breakdown section where I'm like, yeah, man, like Mallon could play drums. If you see him play the songs from Engine, you know,
yeah,
like, I mean, he recreates those drum parts because Engine, as we said, had all these different drummers, none of whom was Mallon, I think.
yeah.
So, you know, he was a good drummer. So it is surprising that, yeah, like sound is not, uh,
Yeah, I mean, it just is and you know, again, I think it could be that they're using like this gated reverb that you've talked about before that was really popular in kind of the late 80s, but it is just it's a strange sound, especially because there is just no cymbal sustain. So you just have this very weird, I don't know, a very non-live kind of sound of the drums on here. I don't like it, but that's really my only big quibble with this one. This is actually, I think, one of the songs that was most surprising to me that I liked most that I didn't remember as well as, you know, the biggest hits, right? Like the Firefly, Western
yeah.
Sky. That. All right.
The one thing interesting about this song too is if I have the of course I have the vinyl that I bought back
Sure,
in the day, but I also
sure.
have the CD release of California,
Yeah.
and I was reading through the lyrics in there, and they're significantly different than what's actually being sung on the record. And
Really?
I think it's just, yeah. And it's one of those things where, like, when you listen to those live performances that are on YouTube that led up to the release of California, and they're doing some of the California songs, lyrics are significantly different. Like, so I
Yeah.
think Eitzel was always toying with different
Yeah.
lyrics and stuff, to the point that the ones printed in the booklet for the album are not correct,
Yeah.
like, so anyway,
Which is
just an
great.
interesting note of him as a lyricist. He was prolific.
All right, so Jay William, why don't we move on to the last song on side A? It has flown by, but I think it's time for us to dig into a true AMC classic. This is Blue and Gray Shirt. Why don't we get into it? Give it a listen right now.
I sat up all morning and I waited for you. With my blue and gray shirt on, yeah, I thought that's my lucky one. I'll sit and face the road now. I don't have a heavy load, no. I got nothing to keep me hanging around here from now.
Lyrics.
Where's the
I'm
compassion?
Jay William, I'm just gonna say just about perfect.
Yeah, so Eitzel has said about this song that it's a true story. That is how he described it on the Songs of Love Live liner notes. I am not entirely certain, but I feel like somewhere along the way I read, or it was suggested, that this was maybe about the death of his mother.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure where I read that. But yeah, beautiful lyrics, beautiful song. A standard, for AMC fans. Like, this is a must play, like every concert probably. So.
And I mean, again, this is okay. So before I get into the music and just, harangue about, this, how great this is. These lyrics are just about perfect. It is a perfect little image of a sentiment that is just, I have never heard articulated in a lyric before, but I just think it is so completely relatable, right? You can imagine yourself in this situation. There is someone that you love or that you care about quite a bit. You're supposed to see them, you're scheduled to see them. You pick out like your favorite shirt. You're just really filled with anticipation, and they don't show up. They don't come for some reason. And it is this feeling, it is such a relatable feeling articulated through this simple act of choosing to wear your favorite shirt for someone who doesn't show up. It captures everything about these disappointments in relationships. It could be that someone died and they didn't show up. It all could be a metaphor or something, or it could just be like, my girlfriend was supposed to come over and she just didn't show up. And God, that's like really crushing. It is this abandonment. The lyrics, over the course of the lyrics, articulate abandonment evolving into resignation, which really is, an Eitzlerian trope, right? Like, that is a thing. That is that evolution from abandonment to resignation is just kind of like, that's it.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. It's a fantastic vocal. Like, this is an example of where the production is perfect, on this song. This is a song that had evolved over time. There's a recording of him playing the 1986. He's playing a solo acoustic show at Bernie's, and he does a version that's titled "Where's the Compassion" or something like that. And it's this, but it's sort of like interwoven with parts of Night Watchman. So, and the lyrics are very different and, kind of go into different places. So it's like, this is something that he kind of like honed and whittled down over time to the version that's on this album, which I think is really great. And it also, the rest of the band, there isn't, it's not the full band on this. Like it's just, but they're just providing like atmospherics in the background and, and it's just really lovely and sort of I don't know if it's a sign of maturity or, like they're just showing more restraint, they're letting
I
be
completely you've pointed out something that I think is super important that struck me as well. I mean, this is the arrangement, the band's involvement, the production is purely supportive of Eitzel and what this song kind of wants to be, right? And I think that that's a huge evolution. I mean, I may be making more out of it than I should. I have no idea what the context was or the history around the recording of this song specifically. But the fact that the band and the producer on this song have kind of, made the decision to step back and let Eitzel step forward is, I think, what's happening in the band at this moment in their career, right? Both Eitzel is deciding that he's going to step forward and take a little bit more of a, I don't want to say dictatorial role because I don't know if it was that, but he's getting more comfortable with being kind of the creative lead of the band. And the band, seemingly based on the way this song is arranged and recorded, I think is accepting that and this the output of that in this song is just so beautiful. This is one of these songs I think is captured perfectly. And the other thing that you had said, Jay William, is the vocal performance that really struck me. This is another gear that Eitzel finds. I talked about this when we talked about Big Night. He had that whisper, which was really interesting, evocative, and different than anything he had done on The Restless Stranger. This is another different gear for Eitzel. It is not that whisper. It's not that like very fragile whisper kind of spooky sound. This is just sweet. It is just a sweetly sung vocal. There's not a lot of power to it, but it's just sweet. It's like choir boy-y kind of.
Yeah, just a really nice melody sung sweetly and straightforward. There's no corn pone. There's no bad liquor, like crazy or even like just the dramatic like going up to like the huge kind of whatever it's just more restrained and kind of like it maintains a mood, and a big part of it is Bruce Caffin is on this one with the pedal steel just providing that like pad in the back of and just like it's so subtle and so effective,
Just great. I mean, what a great and I have to say that the sequencing of the albums is getting better for the band. I'm not going to say it's flawless, but I love that this ends side one. I think it's a great side one ender. And I think Firefly, although there are some fans to it, great opener, right?
Oh yeah, totally. And I mean those are the two most important positions, right? The first and last song of each side,
Yeah.
So.
Well, with that, should we now just say, all right, it's time for us to wrap up side A, and we're going to come back next week with side B. We're going to finish off California. Jay William, why don't you tell our listeners what they should do? If they have a like button, what should they do with it?
What you need to do is you need to take that like button and you smash it over and over.
What about the subscribe?
Subscribe button, you just hit it once. If you hit it more than once, it goes into this other screen and you get confused.
Yeah. You don't want to accidentally subscribe and then unsubscribe because that's going to screw up the data. We talked about the data team, our business intelligence team here at Backtracking.
We worship the data. The data is God.
Listen, so do that. Listen, share it. Do you have a friend? Share it with a friend. Do you have maybe a family member who loves good music and loves, to find new bands that maybe they haven't heard of before? You just share it with them.
You have a friend overseas who's curious about what American music sounds like.
Yeah, that's right.
Share it with them.
And write a review, for God's sake, because how are people going to find this fucking podcast if you don't write it a review and give it 5 stars? Because 5 stars really that's what we deserve.
There's all kinds of music podcasts out there. People are going to be like, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed. I can't decide which one. So the only way from the multitude of other competing AMC podcasts out there is if you give us 5 stars.
That's right. All right, so listen, thank you. Get in touch with us. You can find us on X. It is at Backtracking Rocks ROX. Instagram at Backtracking Rocks ROX. Reddit, username Backtracking Rocks ROX. For God's sake, send us a fucking email at backtrackingrocksrox@gmail.com. Just do it. Just take the time, tell us what you think. And then we will be back next week. We're going to cover the rest of California, and that's it. Jay William?
That's not it. We're going to do more albums beyond
We'll
California.
do more albums after that, but that'll be it for California. We're not going to do, there's no 3 sides. We're going to do 2
We will
sides.
we'll never return to it. We'll never refer to it again. Next week is it.
We're gonna bury it. We're going to bury it. All right, so listen, Jay William, thank you for the time as always.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for the airwaves. We're huge in Hawaii. We're huge.
We will see all of you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.